Welcome everyone to our Cook with OC program today. Before we begin, Osteoporosis Canada acknowledges the land that our offices, located in Toronto, are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. My name is Tracie Napoli, Director of Fund Development and MARCOM at Osteoporosis Canada, and I will be your host for today. We'd like to thank Get Cracking for their partnership on this cooking demo. Now, this cooking demo will provide general information about cooking and food knowledge. It's not intended as individualized health or nutrition advice, but if you have questions about nutrition, consult a physician or registered dietitian. And during the webinar, we, of course, as always, want to hear from you. So if you have a question or a comment, you can click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen or even enter it in the chat and enter it there. And no worries, we are recording this as always, so you'll be able to watch it again if you have any questions on what you've seen today. We'll also do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar within the time available. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Nutrition is a key component for strong and healthy bones. And the 5 nutrients that we're focusing on are the essential nutrients for bone health. They're calcium, vitamin D, protein, magnesium, and vitamin K. And of course, osteoporosis always recommends that whenever possible to try and get your calcium and protein and other nutrients through food sources. So the 5 nutrients, a quick summary of what they do for your bone health and in helping to manage osteoporosis. Calcium is one of the key minerals that supports new bone formation and helps maintain strong bones. Vitamin D ensures our bodies can absorb enough calcium to keep bone strong and supports muscle function. Protein is necessary to build and repair bone tissue and helps keep muscles strong. Magnesium helps our body use vitamin D, which again is important for calcium absorption. And vitamin K activates a protein that helps build bone and bind minerals such as calcium to the bone structure. Our featured ingredient in today's recipe is eggs, and eggs are an excellent source of protein. They contain healthy fats and many nutrients like vitamins A, D, E, choline, iron, and folate. And eggs are one of the few foods that naturally contain vitamin D, necessary for bone health. Now, Osteoporosis Canada does recommend routine vitamin D supplementation for Canadian adults year-round, but by adding vitamin D enhanced foods like eggs and milk, which is fortified with vitamin D to your diet, it's another great way to increase intake of this important nutrient. We have way more recipes on our website featuring all different kinds of nutrients, including eggs. And one of our favorites is a green eggs and ham bagel recipe, where each serving has 31 grams of protein and 350 milligrams of calcium. And you can get this and other recipes at osteoporosis.ca/recipes. So today's featured recipe is a creamy egg and squash risotto, and each serving has 450 milligrams of calcium and 27 grams of protein. And eggs are a quick and easy and delicious way to help meet our protein needs. 2 eggs contain about 13 grams of protein each, and this recipe will have just over 1.5 eggs per serving. It serves 4. Sorry, we're having a bit of a trouble with getting our slides aligned here. Well, I know who Emily is, so I'm just going to, while we figure this out, I'm going to introduce Emily. We want to welcome Emily. She is the author and co-author of 11 cookbooks. She's a professional home economist, freelance food writer, chef, and she also writes and develops recipes for print and online publications that include everyday cooking and healthy eating. And she can be found on TV, radio, and webcasts just like this one. So we want to welcome Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Tracie. Hey, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well on this Tuesday afternoon. Sun's shining. If you hear a little woof woof, my my little dog Lincoln is excited to make risotto this afternoon. So Tracie, this is one of my favorites because I love risotto of any kind.
So do I.
But this one in particular has like an extra hit of protein for sure and creaminess, which I think is a little bit addictive, which I think is okay because it's a great recipe to be addicted to.
It's absolutely fantastic. And when you see Emily, I'm not there stirring the pot with Emily. We stir other kinds of pots. But with you, when you're watching Emily do the recipe, you're going to see how she's actually incorporating the egg. So it's not maybe what you're used to. It's almost like a carbonara, right? For rice.
It is, yeah. Think of it that way. That's probably a great approach for those of you that have made carbonara, which is another classic Italian dish. I think this is a great way to get that protein into a dish that oftentimes you might see as a first course as instead of a main course. So this is a great way to have it as a main course for sure.
Absolutely. And if you've never made risotto, don't be alarmed. It's really easy. There's just a few key things you need to remember. And before we get Emily started, as always, we are going to give away an unbreakable apron. And Emily has it on. She's modeling. So if you are on at the end of this webinar and I call your name, we will ship you one. So I'm going to send it off to Emily now.
Perfect. Thanks, Tracie. And as Tracie mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We'll try to get through them all. I sometimes will throw out information that may answer your question before you even had it. So that's always fun too. And this is great because it is something that can be kind of a pantry friendly meal. I don't know about you, but I always have eggs in my refrigerator. And oftentimes if I have that kind of hunger strike, it's just like, what do I want? I want something comforting and something that will kind of fill me, and eggs fit the bill, which I absolutely adore. So we are actually not going to start off with eggs. We're going to start off with the risotto portion first and then kind of move into our eggs. So I have everything pretty much ready to go. And that is, if you have the opportunity and time to do that, that will save you within a recipe like this, because it really is about kind of being attentive to the pot. If you have somebody that will be helping you in the kitchen, or you're having friends come over, this is a great one to have them kind of do the work. You can kind of get other things ready while they're stirring your risotto pot. And I'll give you a few little secrets along the way. You might not have to stir as much as you think. That's the good part. So I do have my recipe out and ready to go for a couple reasons. I want to make sure I have all the ingredients, but also that I'm kind of following along and doing it properly for you. So if you catch me doing anything wrong, just let me know, because it's been known to happen. So the first thing I have in this lovely red pot is my vegetable broth. I am going full vegetarian for this risotto today. If you have chicken broth, you can use that. And to be honest with you, if you don't have broth, you could just use water and season it with a little bit of salt. You could add a little bit of fresh herbs to it, and you will still get that wonderful flavor. So don't feel that, if you don't have broth, that you can't make a risotto, because it works really, really well. So I've already kind of brought this to a simmer. It's still steaming. And I actually used this cast iron pot just to help kind of keep the heat. Because I'll have to take it off as I cook other things. But you can keep this on low heat, kind of in your back burner. So think of your 4-burner stove and just have it kind of on low near the pot. This is our main pot. And I want you to see how nice and big it is. It's deep, but it's not really a big, tall pot, which I think is key to making a great risotto dish, because it doesn't have to kind of cook up the sides of the pot. It has a nice big surface area that will allow us to get a really nice even base of all of our ingredients. And you'll see that as I cook through, I think it'll be more visible. So I have my ingredients that I'm going to start with, which are onions and garlic and squash. And I'm using butternut squash. You could use, I had a great supply of kabocha squash come from the garden this summer. That's a great one. If you have some acorn squash that you need to cut up, you could use that. And if you're already worried about dealing with a squash that's hard and you can't cut into it, you can buy diced squash that's frozen. So that will work as well. And that will make your life easier. You just have to scoop out 2 cups of the squash and have them ready to go, okay? It will be a softer texture just because it's frozen, but it will still have that beautiful squash flavor, which is really nice. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of just a neutral oil. So something that doesn't have a big flavor, but if all you use is olive oil or extra virgin olive oil at home, that will totally work. We really just need it to kind of get things going here. So just a couple tablespoons. And then I'm going to start with my squash. And if you look at this squash and you're thinking, I can't dice my squash that small, it's going to be a little bit bigger, that's okay. What that means is that it'll just take a little bit longer to cook, okay? What I do want you to do, though, is if you're chopping them a little bit bigger, make sure they're all the same size so that as you're cooking your risotto, they're all cooking kind of at the same rate. So if you have some big pieces and some small pieces, those small pieces will break down and the big ones won't be cooked through, okay? So we want to make sure that they're about the same size as you can possibly get. And then I'm going to add an onion. I'm just using a small onion here because I just want to enhance the flavor of the squash. If you have a really big onion that you need to use, you can totally use the whole onion. Red onion, green onions, leeks, whatever you have in the pantry, you can totally use in the risotto because this is going to break down and kind of become the flavor of the risotto, which is really, really nice. And then I'm also going to add just a couple cloves of garlic in here. And this is just to kind of get all these flavors started, get a little bit of the water out of the vegetables, and also get a hint of color on them as well, because we want to bring out their natural sweetness. I think that squash is considered a nice sweet vegetable, and it's just a great addition to these types of dishes because they add that really nice creaminess with a hint of sweetness, okay? So it's starting to sizzle here. And I'm going to add, I don't know about you, but I always have parsley. Parsley is my like fallback fresh herb. Whenever I want something to have a little bit of freshness, a little bit of color, parsley fits the bill. And it also lasts a really long time, even crisper. So I'm adding a couple tablespoons of parsley right from the beginning. And if you're thinking, why am I not adding it at the end? Well, you can totally add more at the end. But what I want to do here is really create flavor from the beginning. So I'm adding that parsley right from the beginning. But if you happen to have some fresh basil, fresh mint would be lovely in here, fresh oregano, you could use any of those and get them right in the beginning so that the flavor starts to come through. We're also going to add, this is one of my pantry staples that I have at home, is Italian seasoning. So this is just a mixture of different fresh herbs. So basil, rosemary, thyme, marjoram, and oregano. So it just is a great little all-purpose seasoning. And we need half a teaspoon, which is going to go in the beginning here as well. And anytime you are using a dried herb, it is nice to kind of give it the time to bloom and get the flavor out of it. So start from the beginning as well. Okay. So we want to just cook this for, it takes, again, this is going to depend on how big this pot is. If you're cooking it in a small little pot like this, it's going to take a little time to get brown. So it usually takes 3 or 5 minutes to get a little bit of color on our squash, on our veggies, okay? And I do want to be stirring it. You don't have to stir it constantly, but you do want to make sure that you're stirring it so that nothing is kind of sitting right at the bottom. Now, let's talk about rice, because that's what's going to go in next. And we are going to be using arborio rice. So arborio rice is considered that risotto rice that is pretty much in all grocery stores. You don't have to go looking for it. It's a short grain rice, and it creates kind of the creaminess that I think we all love about risotto. You can cook it like regular rice, so long grain rice and other rices, but it really, really benefits from the process of risotto. So if you think about it, risotto, the dish, which is a rice dish, but it also has kind of become a technique of cooking. So you may have heard things like barley risotto or other types of grains used in a risotto because it's that process of stirring. But it really is about the rice, and the short grain rice, just the way it breaks down helps create that creaminess that I think is wonderful and what most people love about a risotto, okay? So I have some nice little bits of brown color on my squash, and I'm going to add my rice right in here. So this is 1.5 cups. of our rice going in. Now there's other kind of, if you are a risotto lover, you may have heard of other rices that are used for risotto, and you could totally use those as well. But I like to think of arborio as like the starter risotto rice, so that you can just not have to worry about it. It'll give you a nice texture and a really nice creaminess. All right, so you want to make sure that everything's nicely coated here. And it's kind of dry. You can kind of hear it's not really sizzling anymore. That's when I'm going to start to add this broth. And I have this ladle that basically measures about half a cup. It's like a 4-ounce ladle. Okay. And I'm going to add a couple of them right in the beginning. And kind of start stirring here. Just like that. Okay. And then it stops, right? Like, see how fast that was? You saw that steam, it looked amazing. And then it's just like, we're done. Now it's time to cook. So here's where you have to kind of play around with your heat a little bit. I'm using a butane burner, which is not as consistent as my gas stove or perhaps your electric stove or your induction stove. You just want to keep an eye on it so it's not at a rolling boil, because it's going to cook too quickly. The broth is going to evaporate off too quickly, and then the rice won't be able to cook and become creamy. So here I have kind of a vigorous simmer. I just want to turn it down a smidge more so that it's not too much. There, that's a little bit better. So basically, all that needs to happen here is, as you stir, you'll notice that if you take a look at my pot, the liquid I already added is kind of gone. Okay, so you can see I wiped it with my spatula. It's empty. So that's when you're going to come in with that broth and add it again. And if you feel more comfortable, I say a ladle at a time, but if you feel more comfortable, add 3 ladles. Okay, don't worry, you're not going to wreck it. It'll just mean that you won't have to add it as many ladles, so you won't be kind of going at the same time. So you always hear, when it comes to risotto, you hear people say, oh, I'm not going to make risotto. I got to stand there and stir the whole time. You'll notice as we go through this process, I will not be standing here for 20 minutes stirring. However, this is my little tip to you. If you have somebody that wants to be a big helper in the kitchen, but you want them out of your way, you make risotto and you tell them that if they move from this pot, if they stop stirring, it's going to be ruined. And then they'll be out of your way and you can continue on and do whatever you need to do. So I love that as a little kind of helper tip for those that are cooking together in the kitchen. So as this is going through, the squash will cook. Okay, so we have a few other things we have to get ready. One of them is the kale. Okay, so we're going to add some greens to this because I love the beautiful color of squash. By the way, if you wanted to, you could use sweet potatoes. That would be another veggie that you could use, and that would be delicious. It'll break down much quicker than the squash, but it gives you that nice kind of brightness of color. So we're going to add some kale, and I just left one here. We only need 2 cups. So when you buy that big, beautiful bunch of kale and you come home and you think, well, Emily said I only need 2 cups. Now, what am I going to do with all this kale? You'll find plenty of things to do with it. You'll go to the OC website and you'll find some great recipes with kale. But you can also make salads and soups and sauces, so many things. But you can also freeze it, okay? So that you can make this risotto another time with more kale. So what I'm going to do is, I don't want to use this thick stem. So what I'm going to do is just kind of cut away the leaves from it. And if you have, if you make vegetable stock or you like to roast fish, these types of stems are great. They do have a more pronounced flavor. So I would use it just for a vegetable broth, as opposed to if you were doing like a lighter soup. Just because the kale stem has a strong flavor. Or you could use this as a base, so you can just break it up and roast fish on it, which is really nice. And it just provides a little bit of flavor. You could use some fresh herbs. So you could just put it in the freezer. Or you could do what many do and put it in the freezer, and 3 years from now, look at it and go, what was I going to save those stems for? Because I know sometimes that happens too. So we're just going to chop this up and measure it out. We just need 2 cups. And I'm not packing in my cups. So that's something that I always love talking about when it comes to especially greens. So if the recipe doesn't specify lightly packed or firmly packed, just kind of fill your cup. Don't push. So if I push this down, look at that. I get like half a cup. It's complete different. So you just want a nice kind of light 2 cups of kale. And I like to get that ready so that it's good to go. Now, if you don't have kale or you are definitely not a kale lover, what you can use are other greens. Okay, so you could use Swiss chard, which would be really nice. Rapini, which is one of my favorites, that has a nice slight little bit of bitterness, like a mustardy flavor. Any of the Asian greens would be great in here too. You can even use broccoli. You could use peas, frozen. Not, it doesn't have to be fresh. So if you have some veggies in the freezer that you need to use up, you could also buy frozen kale and just measure out 2 cups because it's already chopped for you and add it in at the point of the recipe. So there are lots of conveniences that you can purchase. So don't feel that you need to buy that fresh kale for this recipe. You can use frozen, much like you could use the frozen squash. And if it's more economical, that's the perfect way to go. Okay, so I have my kale ready. And did you notice that I just went back and I added some more broth? So you can kind of hear it bubbling away again. Okay, but I'm not standing here stirring and stirring and stirring because I need to get other things ready. And one of them is the eggs. Okay, so these are, I'm going to move this over here. I only need 3 eggs for this portion. We're going to be using some more eggs because we're going to fry eggs for the top, which I think makes this so delicious and beautiful. We're going to use 3 eggs, and I'm using large eggs. So if you take a look, I have white and brown eggs. And I love asking this question, whether it's kids or adults, because the answers are sometimes so funny. I won't even mention how funny they are because they're not even correct, because I'm going to give you the right answer. So who lays brown? See, I always say the answer. Who lays brown eggs and who lays white eggs? So typically, the brown eggs are laid by brown chickens and the white chickens lay the white eggs. Now, a lot of people say, well, Emily, why are the brown eggs more expensive? Well, the brown chickens are a little bit bigger. They eat a little bit more. They need a little bit more food, so they're a little bit more expensive. And I'm not including kind of the omega eggs and any of that stuff because that's kind of a whole different thing. And these are farm fresh eggs, so if you have your own chickens, you will have beautiful fresh eggs. But when you go to the store, you can be guaranteed that you're getting farm fresh eggs because they only take like 3 to 7 days to get to the store. And that's like from the chicken laying the eggs to the store itself. So you're getting beautiful farm fresh eggs. So it's a great, easy protein to keep in your refrigerator and enjoy. So we're going to enjoy it in 2 different spots in this recipe. I'm going to add a little bit more broth. And while I'm cracking these eggs, Tracie, do we have any questions that might have come in? Or?
Oh, yes, we do. We actually have a few questions. And one of them, and I'm glad this person asked the question because they asked, could you use a plant-based beverage instead of milk or cream? And there is no cream. There is no milk in the recipe. What happens is the creaminess comes from stirring the risotto. It's the starch that's released. So proper risotto has no cream and has no milk in it. So this is great. This is actually a vegetarian recipe if you don't use the chicken stock and you choose to use the vegetable stock. So it's great for a lot of different people, depending on their diet choices. And the way that we're using the eggs, let's say you didn't want to put the fried egg on top, but adding it in is fantastic because you're fortifying it with protein. There's a lot of different recipes we've talked about. We have that carbonara recipe on our website where we did the similar thing with the eggs and going into the noodles. There's also soups where if you whisk the egg like we're doing here and you put it in, you don't get pieces of egg, you just are getting more of like a creamy kind of soup base, which is really great. So that's just to address one of those questions. And then we have a lot of questions about, which kind of vegetables to use. I'm just scrolling through here as I look at them. So here's the thing, and we always like to share this with you. When Emily and I go through about all the recipes we want to develop, and we're with the partners and we're talking about, you know, what kind of techniques and strategies we want to use, the ingredients we choose are very deliberate because they have the nutrients that we want to focus on for bone health. And that includes the calcium and the protein. So the ways you're getting the calcium in this recipe are through the kale, through the Parmesan, and we'll talk about Parmesan just for a second. So the aged cheeses out there have more calcium than soft cheeses. So it's not like cheese in general. You can just say, you know, it has X amount of calcium or protein. You really need to read your product labels. So for example, 1 tablespoon of grated Parmesan cheese has 70 milligrams of calcium. There's 1 cup of Parmesan cheese in this recipe. And that's going to be divided between 4 servings if that's your main meal. So if you start kind of, you know, and it's all about choice. We all, right, Emily? We love personal choice. We always say, you know, you guys choose it. But when you start making those changes, then you're going to start maybe, you know, reducing or maybe boosting the calcium. But 1 meal, right? Emily, what do we say? 1 meal isn't going to make or break.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, exactly. It's what you're going to have throughout the day, throughout the week, but there are reasons why. Now, quickly, somebody asked about like sodium. So is it different? You know, how's it going to work if you use low sodium broth or water? If you're trying to reduce your sodium, I mean, everything is flavor. Everything is in there for a reason, but this is about your choice and what you want to eat. So do you want to chat about maybe just, could you reduce the parm a little bit in terms of sodium, some other cheeses that we could include in there?
For sure. So there's plenty of ways to, and I often talk about this with my mom because my mom doesn't use very much salt in her cooking. So she's actually a great person that I reach out to. I'm like, taste this. Do you think it's salty? And our taste buds do change over time. I had this conversation with a gentleman just on the weekend. We were cooking together and he said, you know, I feel like restaurants are using too much salt because all I taste is salt. And our taste buds do change over time. So, and it could be that you are just tasting salt. I find that that is a go-to for many because it fixes a lot of things. So if you are already kind of reducing your sodium and cooking at home without salt or reducing the salt that you're using, you could very easily do this with water or low sodium or no sodium broth. You could use homemade broth because that you're going to season yourself. You could leave salt out entirely, and the flavor will be different based on what you've added. The other thing is so that's the first kind of sodium part. So far, I haven't added any other sodium to this other than that broth. Okay. So you can actually, as this is cooking, because you're going to want to taste it to make sure that the rice is cooked, you can taste it to see how salty it is. And if you're going to need to add something. The other element of that sodium or saltiness is the cheese component that we're adding. So you can add a little bit at a time. We're actually going to add the cheese to this egg mixture. That's what's going to help create that creaminess, but I'm also going to add a little bit of salt. So you can take this away right away if you know that you're reducing your sodium and just rely on the cheese. You can add half the amount of cheese, stir it in. And the great part about using real Parmesan cheese or pecorino or grana padano is that this will melt with the heat of the rice mixture, okay? So you can stir it in and add a little bit more, knowing that if you're not using the full cup, you've reduced the amount of calcium as well, but then you can add to it, right? If I add everything with the salt and you taste it and you think it's too salty, I can't take that away. So it's easier for you to add to it and then make it to your palate, okay? That's okay. And that's what I love about cooking and I love about these webinars is because these questions come up and we can talk about stuff like this because I know that there's a lot of people that love following recipes. And I love that you love following recipes. That's my job. That's what I do. But you have to also remember that if you're trying to do things at home, you can change those recipes to suit you. And salt is a great example of that, where then you can season to your taste. A lot of the cases, we have to give an amount of salt because we're doing nutrient analysis on it. So we can't just say salt to taste, because that's not fair to you, who is then looking at the analysis going, well, I really want to know how much sodium is in here, but if I use this much and you're using that much, I don't know. So if you know that I'm adding this much salt, that's part of this whole sodium. I mean, there's other components. Remember, there's the broth and the salt that are adding to it. But at least you have a base amount. So any that you take away will reduce that sodium. Does that make sense, Tracie, or did I just like
That was
make this
excellent, Emily.
confusing?
That was excellent. I think that was really good, because we get this question often and we are conscious of other things that people are looking out for. So that's really great. We do have another couple of questions, and it's about rice. So, and this was a really good question because I have often thought of this myself. So when you buy rice, if you buy different types of rice, like risotto rice, maybe you're buying basmati rice or jasmine rice, some of the packaging, depending on the rice, will tell you to rinse it first. But if you notice on the packaging on a risotto rice, even long grain, I think, Emily, it doesn't tell you to rinse the rice first. So somebody said, like, should they be rinsing the risotto rice?
So the one thing about the risotto rice is we want that little bit of starch, which in the end is a lot of starch because it's rice, to help create that texture, that creaminess. Now, sometimes it is a packaging that the company wants you to rinse it. So that's why they're making that recommendation. But you also have to remember, sometimes that's a blanket statement that goes on all the rices, perhaps, that company makes, okay? That it's just the same. So all you have to do is kind of take two different types of rices in the grocery store, look at what it says on the back, and does it sound the same? But these aren't the same rices. Why does it sound the same? So it could just be for convenience. So I typically, and this is just a personal thing, I don't rinse arborio rice or carnaroli, which is another risotto rice, or violano nano, which is another risotto rice. I don't rinse any of those. Now, if I'm making basmati or jasmine rice, those fragrant rices, I do rinse those. And I recently saw a long grain white rice package that recommended rinsing it as well. Okay, so you can kind of, and I've oftentimes made long grain rice without rinsing because I just want to get the pot on the stove. I want to get dinner made. But it's really about your comfort level and how you see and cook the rice. So if you're using a rice cooker, or if you're just using a pot, or if you're doing it in the oven, all these things, are something that you have to take into account. I could make this with long grain rice. It's not going to have the same texture, but you'll still get a really nice rice dish. It'll be more like a pilaf style. And if I use basmati or jasmine, which typically are less time cooking, they only take about 10 minutes really to cook, it would just be a big mushy pile. So it's really about keeping in mind the length of time. So I know that people love making brown rice. It has that nice nutty flavor. Typically it takes over 20 minutes to cook. So if you were doing it in something like this, which again, you totally could, you just got to be prepared to have enough broth to cook that, because it still has the hull on the outside. You're going to have to cook through that before you get to the rice. And the texture might not be the same. So, and this is why I love cooking, because there's so much experiments that can happen. There was a time when you would just use arborio rice to make risotto. And then somebody said, why aren't we doing this with barley? And so barley risotto came to be, those types of things, because someone decided to experiment and give it a try. And if you're doing this at home, just take notes, like write it down. If you're using a recipe, write that you've decided to use, this much of the ingredient, or I'm going to try this with brown rice, but know that I probably need more broth because it's going to take longer to cook. And on the broth note, just to kind of jump ship for a second, I don't have very much left in my broth pot, which means that I should probably start tasting the rice, okay? And if you take a look at my pot, if you look at the squash, the edges look a little bit rounder because they're cooking down. The rice looks a little bit fuller. It's absorbing the broth. So I'm going to taste a little bit to see where I'm at. Because it really is about the texture of the rice. And this is what I always love telling people, because my kids sometimes spot me and I'm like sneaking a taste in the pot. And they're like, Mom, don't put that spoon back in the pot. So just take your spoon and take some out, just in case your kids are watching. And blow on it because it's going to be hot. Okay, this already has so much flavor. So delicious. And the rice, so many will say al dente, to the tooth. And you want it to be firm but creamy. So if you take it and bite it and it still has a firm bite to it, and that's not for you, just keep cooking it and add more broth. So this broth may not be enough if you're looking for a softer textured risotto. Okay, so this is pretty much done, Tracie. I have to get my egg mixture together here, which I kind of left alone. I whisked up my eggs. Okay, right here.
Good. It looks
And I am
good.
going to add that salt. So just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to add my cup of fresh parm. Now I did grate some. I might need to grate more because this is always light and fluffy. So I'm going to measure it out here. And as it sits, it does kind of deflate a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to have to grate just a bit more. And I'm just using a little microplane here. You could use a box grater as well to get that nice fine shred. You could also just use a cheese grater and have a bigger shred of Parmesan, because it is that fresh cheese. It's going to melt beautifully with the heat of the rice. All right, there's my cup of parm. So I'm basically adding this Parmesan cheese to my egg to mix this up. Okay? And you see how quickly it will deflate again as I'm mixing it. So this is our mixture that will add some protein right into the rice. But most importantly, eggs do this so well, add that creaminess to our risotto. Okay, so a little double bonus here. So that is ready to go. I'm going to add my kale right into my risotto. So because it's topped and I am only using the leaves, it doesn't need too long to cook. So I want to just almost wilt it. It'll kind of turn that nice bright green. And I have my risotto looking a little bit stiff. Okay, so if you see it's kind of separating out a little bit, I'm going to add a little bit more broth with my kale. Add another smidge. And I have probably about 1/2 cup left in my pot still when it comes to the vegetable broth that I'm adding. Okay? And I did taste the squash. The squash is nicely cooked through. There we are. And then I'm going to add the egg mixture here. So this is delicious. You could have this now, but there's not enough protein in here. We have to get some protein in there and some calcium. So in goes our cheese and egg mixture. So you just kind of want to do this nicely and stir it around. Oh, I'm going to turn the heat off, because eggs, I love, this is another reason why I love eggs. They cook so quickly. So all this residual heat is going to cook our egg and melt the cheese in here. And we get this beautiful looking risotto. And you can just kind of see how creamy it is from adding the egg mixture in there. Okay. Just like so. And really, so if you fried eggs, if you scrambled eggs, you know that they only take about 30 seconds if you're cooking an egg in your skillet. So this, you can stir it for 30 seconds or about a minute, but you'll see, like, you can just see how rich and creamy when I scrape my spatula along the bottom, you can see how the risotto just kind of slowly flows back in there, which is just a wonderful consistency for risotto. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I got to get our topper ready. Did we have any more questions, Tracie? Because I'm going to fry an egg here too.
Yes,
So
you
that
go
we
fry
have our
the
topping.
egg. That looks delicious. And I just wanted, so a few things, we got a couple of questions coming in. You know, we have some people who tell us that kind of a barrier to them cooking is that they don't really enjoy it. And we do a lot, right? That's the bottom line. It's not like Emily and I like to cook, so we enjoy our time in the kitchen. But I think part of it is that a lot of the recipes we do are quick, are things that, you know, don't take a long time. Risotto, you can't make it fast. It's the amount of time it's going to take. And so it's kind of like a leisurely recipe, right, Emily? Like, and you mentioned it, and I love that tip about the helper. If you've got that person who's like over your shoulder and you're like, let me give you a job. You're going to mix the risotto for like 20 minutes. So it's something where if you're tired, some people it's too long to stand, just get a chair or a stool and you can sit and take a break while you're stirring. If the stirring is a bit of an issue, so either you could have somebody help with that, or B, you could add a bit more of the stock so you don't have to add it as frequently. So that's also something you could do. We had someone ask, you know, why do we choose to use kale? We do have kale in quite a few of our recipes. And the reason is it is actually nutritional. Kale has calcium. Other vegetables like spinach, they do have calcium, but they don't absorb. Spinach is great, you know, vitamin K for other nutrients you need. But when we're looking to amp up the calcium, we did choose the kale, but you can choose the spinach or the Swiss chard, or as Emily said, the rapini. It's whatever you would like to use. I have frozen peas. We have a lot of recipes with frozen peas because it's really easy. They're in the freezer. And so that's just to answer that question. I've got two new ones that just came in.
Oh, I will say too that this is delicious. I know spring is almost there. Spring, like think asparagus, guys. This is delicious with
Yum.
asparagus.
Yep.
So get that, you know, fresh asparagus, and you could add it at the same time with the kale because really it doesn't need very much time to cook. So within a few minutes, it will cook and be beautiful in there. I'm gonna crack an egg into my frying pan.
An egg.
I'm just going to let you know that I did heat my pan. I added a little bit of oil in there, and I'm going to crack my egg right in here, okay, and let it just kind of cook. And I like my eggs over easy because I want to have that nice little bit of runny yolk inside. I don't want my heat to be too high here, but you do want to make sure that, and you can do this with a nonstick or regular skillet as long as your pan is heated. Okay, so oftentimes you'll see that nonstick skillets are used to fry eggs, but you can do it with a regular skillet too. Just heat your pan, add the oil, and make sure the oil's hot before you add the egg. And I also like to season my egg before it goes onto my plate. So I'm going to add a little bit of fresh ground pepper and just a little smidge of salt. Okay, if you want, you could actually take some of that fresh parm and put it on there too. You want to do that? Let's do that. I'm feeling like it should be a little extra cheesy. Okay, now I'm going to flip this egg because my white is set. And I actually love, if you see that nice little bit of golden edge that I have here, I love that because that adds a nice little crispness to the egg. And I'm just going to flip my egg over. And I'm going to get a bowl ready, Tracie, because I have to serve up some risotto.
You must do the taste test. This is a really lovely recipe. You can make it for, you know, a weeknight if you've got everything is pantry actually. If you think about it, with the exception of maybe the squash and the kale, unless you have squash frozen and kale frozen. I mean, this is great. And it's quite a treat, I think, if you have this. Let's look at Emily. Roy, let's do an overhead of her scooping that delicious risotto.
Got a nice fluidity to it. So when you spoon it out, it just kind of slides right off that spoon. Okay, and then you just take your egg here, and I flipped it back over to put right on top so you can kind of still see that little bit of fluidness on the top of the egg when I give it a wiggle. And you can do another flourish of garnish here if you wanted parsley, or if you use basil, you could use that. You could also take a little bit more cheese and put it all the way around, okay? And something that one of my little guilty pleasures that I love doing is I like to use balsamic glaze on this. And it's basically just a little reduction of balsamic that just gives it a nice little hint of sweetness, but also a little bit of acidity, which is really nice, that you can just kind of drizzle on top and serve it. So this is basically restaurant quality food, you guys, that you can make at home with pantry ingredients, and as eggs as your star ingredient. So I think, you know, inside and on top, you're going to feel energized after making this and, of course, eating it.
Okay,
You have more
Emily, you know what
questions.
you have to do? I do, but
I
you know
know.
what we have to do? You have to take that. Oh, you're getting the thumbs up. Great job, Emily. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So while Emily, we're gonna watch her, and then you know the yolk, you know, it ends up like almost like a sauce. It like breaks over.
Yeah, there it is.
Do you want to do a quick overhead, Roy? Roy is our manager of web. He's behind the scenes. So when you hear me, there we go.
There's the
That's
the
gorgeous.
nice extra creamy yolk that I can't get on my spoon. There we go. I have to blow on it. It is hot. This is real live cooking, guys. It's hot.
Okay.
So what are the questions? Can I answer them?
Yes, yeah. We'll chew and then I can talk while you're
Okay.
while you're doing that. So we had someone who must be on our other webinars because she knows how much, Jean, you know how much we love to freeze everything if we can. So she asked a really good question. Could you make the risotto, have it, but you only, let's say, want 2 portions, and freeze the other 2 portions individually and defrost it and then add the fresh egg, fried egg on top when you bring it out? Could she do that?
Yeah, you totally could do that. But you know what else you could do?
No,
You could like tuck it in the refrigerator. Don't do the fried egg on top. Tuck it in the refrigerator. Take it out in a couple of days from the fridge. Make little pancakes, risotto pancakes, pan fry them, and then put the egg on top. I've done that.
Delicious.
Many
I've done that
times.
too, actually. Because
And
you get
it's
the
so
crispy
wonderful.
rice. If you like that texture, you get the crispy on the outside and the creamy on the inside, and then with the egg.
And because the egg and cheese are in there, it's kind of an extra way to enjoy that creaminess, because you get the crispness from pan frying it, but when you break it open, not only do you have the egg on top, but then you have the creaminess from, because you put that egg inside as well. So it's a double winning recipe, whether it's fresh as a leftover or frozen later. And you can make those risotto cakes from the frozen mixture too. Just let it thaw before you use it.
Absolutely. Let's see, we have one more. So somebody, yes, who just said, so it's similar to a dish, an Italian dish called arancini, which is essentially what you're saying. So it's like the orange, but you really want the added egg on top. It's almost kind of like a different way to have like brunch.
Mm-hmm.
That
Very
kind
much
of
so.
thing.
So you could actually make this and refrigerate it. You don't have to eat it today, or make it in the morning, refrigerate it, take it out later. Make the little risotto cakes because you're having brunch tomorrow, and then pan fry them. Or if it's easier, throw them all in the oven, warm them through, and then you could poach an egg and put it on top and serve it like as this kind of untraditional eggs benny, with no sauce needed, because the egg itself will open up and create that sauce. So think of it as a lighter version that's a little bit different and fun.
Exactly. Okay, last question here about, because it's all, the questions are all pertaining to the recipe today. So somebody is saying they have a family member that doesn't really like Parmesan cheese. She wants to know if she can substitute it with mozzarella cheese. Those are 2 really different kinds of cheeses, and you're going to end up with quite a different effect, I think. But Emily, what do you think?
So mozzarella cheese, I love, and you could totally use it here. But what will happen is you'll get like, it's going to look like risotto pizza. It's going to be all gooey when you pull it out, which, don't get me wrong, absolutely delicious. It'll be a little trickier to serve. So I would stir in about half a cup of mozzarella, and then see how gooey it is. But you also want a little bit more flavor. So if you want to stay in that family of mozzarella style cheeses, look for something that has a little bit more flavor. Like even a provolone would be nice. Smoked mozzarella would give you a nice little hint of flavor. Um, Fontina, uh, you could use Furlano. So any of those kind of, they all kind of have a similar texture to mozzarella. They'll give you a little bit of gooiness, but they just have a little bit more flavor. Which there's lots of flavor coming from the squash and the seasoning that we use, but the Parmesan really kind of shines through in the end. So you want something to do something similar. Even to be honest with you, a cheddar would be nice in here too. So hopefully
Okay,
that
sorry.
helps.
You know what I was doing? Sorry.
That's okay.
I was looking for the winner of the apron.
Oh, I was eating. I was just thinking about taking
You're
another bite.
eating. I'm like, because we don't want to forget again. So I just want to congratulate. We have got Wilbur Heinrich from Regina, Saskatchewan, who is going to get, yay, Wilbur, we're going to send you the apron. I will email you after this webinar. We want to thank you. Really delicious recipe. We hope you'll try the recipes and, you know, make any adjustments if you want them, but it's always fun to try something new. Let me just share my screen here. All right, so as I said, we've got lots of other recipes on the website, osteoporosis.ca/recipes, and we are actually in development for new recipes. So stay tuned and make sure to check out the website. Now we have a whole bunch of new programming coming up. We have a webinar on February 28th. It's all about menopause, what you need to know with Dr. Nesha Yüksel, and you can get that on the website. We have a cook-along, and if you live in Toronto, Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, Mississauga, or Brampton, Thursday, March 21st, we are going to be making a stovetop beef curry. Emily's going to show us how to make that. So if you actually live in those areas, you can cook along with us. You can have the groceries delivered to your house, and in real time, Emily will give you a cooking demonstration. Now, if you don't live in those areas or you just want to watch, as always, you can register to watch the cooking demo. So that's also on the website. And if you are in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, we have an event. It's going to be at the Parktown Hotel, Nutrition and Bone Health, and that's March 26th with Dr. Dr. Susan Whiting. She's going to present on nutrition and bone health. So if you're there and you want to go say hi to our team there, please do so. So again, that's osteoporosis.ca/events. We have some other in-person events coming up in Vancouver, in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and to serve our French community, we've got a great event coming up in Quebec City, and they're all going to be in March. So you want to make sure you subscribe to our newsletters so that we can get you the information and that you can join us. We want to thank you, as always, to our partners, because without our partners, we could not produce all of this fabulous content. Get Cracking. Thank you so much to Get Cracking. And thank you to Emily, who showed us another fabulous way to have a delicious way to get our bone building nutrients. So Emily, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody who came out today, and I hope you try the recipe.
Exactly. And we want to make sure, like I said, if you can subscribe, just go to the website, top right-hand corner, click subscribe. You'll get everything to your inbox. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. We wish you well. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We look forward to seeing you at our next event or educational webinar. Happy cooking, everyone. Bye, Emily. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Bye, Tracie.
Bye. See you.